Absolutely. So it looks like we still have some people filing in, but
Okay.
it is 1 o'clock. And so I'd like to start things off. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining us in our second attempt at a all chapter virtual meeting. Um, without a great community like you, these meetings just wouldn't happen. So thank you so much for joining us today. It really is a way that we've been able to adapt as a community with the challenges that are going on all over the world. And, Zoom has afforded us to be able to continue to get together and to continue to be social and share in the experience. And so today we've got a pretty special guest lined up for you. So we've got Susan Cohan here, a New Jersey, New York native, and we want to get to her. And I think she's got a pretty special presentation lined up for us. But first, I'd like to give the floor to our executive director, Tony DiGiovanni, to give us a little bit of an update on what's going on with Landscape Ontario.
Hey, Joe, thanks a lot. And I agree with you. This Zoom has given us a really good opportunity to reach a lot more members. So there are some benefits to the COVID situation. In fact, COVID's been good to our industry all around. So there is a positive side. Anyway, so I've always started just about every chapter meeting that I've ever been to, just reminding ourselves of why we're here. And over time, I've been around for 30 years, and I've been able to I call myself the official observer. And we've just, we have such an amazing community, a tight-knit community, and it's something to be proud of. And when I first started, I was kind of figuring out what is this association stuff, and just through observation, really the heart, the energy that keeps us going as a community is this idea that we are a club for mutual improvement and mutual benefit. I mean, that's really the energy. And within that frame is what we do everything. Our goal is, in real simple terms, is to direct and protect the industry. But really, it's the meeting after the meeting. It's a social interaction. It's this community for mutual improvement that is the heart of Landscape Ontario. And also over the years, in terms of observing and talking and listening, what we're trying to do together, like our common vision is we're trying to build and grow a prosperous, professional, ethical, recognized, and contribution-oriented profession. And everything that we do is related somehow to that vision that we're trying to achieve together. But the energy for it comes out of this idea that we're in this frame of mutual benefit. So I never tire of talking about that as an introduction, because that keeps me going. And I just love being part of this community. So just a quick update. We have had a recent win in terms of Bill 118. Many of you are in the snow business, and you know that one of the largest issues this year has been rising insurance rates to the point where a lot of members just couldn't get insurance. And some of them were facing 400% insurance increases. I mean, it's been awful. I've been getting 3 or 4 calls a day from members. We've got a well-developed strategy to deal with this, but unfortunately it does take time. But our first win came last week. Bill 118 changes the statute of limitations from 2 years to 60 days. Originally it was for 10 days, but out of the process of debate, it was 60 days. That's still huge, because that'll get rid of the frivolous lawsuits that are making it difficult for insurance companies to deal with our business. But that's not the only thing. And just I want to give a shout out to MPP Norm Miller. because he was the one that brought it forward as a private members bill. And I'll tell you, private members bills hardly ever go through. This one went through, and talking to Norm, he said the reason it went through is because of our grassroots campaign, because of you. You know, most of you got active. You talked to your local MPP. Norm Miller heard about it, and he was so impressed with the energy of our community that he has now said he's going to help us on the second stage. So the second stage is what we're calling the New Hampshire model. So in New Hampshire, if you are accredited as a contractor, and you go through what they have a Green Snow Pro program, then their liability is limited. The idea is that you're professional, you know what you're doing, you've done as much as you can within the snow arena, and therefore you're limited in liability. So we've adapted that New Hampshire model, and we're pushing the Smart About Salt accreditation as the model to go forward. And we've had several meetings with the Ministry of Environment now, and we've put together an alliance that includes the conservation authorities and World Wildlife Fund and the building owners and managers. I mean, it's a really strong alliance, and they're starting to listen. And the best part is that Norm Miller has actually hired staff to help us go through with that second stage. So I expect that we will be successful, and but it'll take a while. It'll take a year or so. The third thing that we're doing is we're exploring some self-insurance models. I've been around here long enough to know that this cycle of insurance happens every 10 years or so. The market starts to get really hard, and the insurance companies get scared and they back out for various reasons. And in order to stabilize that, I think we need to at least explore this idea of being our own insurance company, and stabilize the issue that way. The other thing we're doing is we've applied for a CSA standard. Right now, there is no official standard for snow operations. And so when claims go to court, they're all over the place because no one knows what the standard is. So that's another area. So that's that quickly emerged. That whole insurance issue quickly emerged as really serious issue, and those are the items that are the strategies that we're following. I also want to quickly mention, and I'm sorry, Susan, I don't want to take your time, but I want to quickly mention we've made huge inroads on the GROW program. So our biggest issue as an association is labor, finding employees. And Sally Harvey in our office has done some amazing work getting a sizable grant to work on this issue. And it's called the GROW program. It's a three-pronged program where we're taking unemployed people, giving them 6 weeks of training, finding them jobs. And then we're also have a training program for existing employees that are at the supervisory level. And we have a employer of choice program as well. And we're doing that right now in Muskoka, Toronto, and Hamilton. It's a pilot. Eventually, it'll be spread across Ontario. So that's an excellent program where we're actually going to almost becoming an employment hub to feed, to train, create some enthusiastic employees for you. So when we send out surveys and that, please fill them out, because we need that data to inform government about this program. And the last thing I want to say before leaving is, Congress, we can't have face-to-face Congress every year, or this year, for obvious reasons. And Congress to me was way more than a trade show. It was really, to me, it was community building on speed. It was where everybody in the industry gets together. 15,000 people, and we excite each other by all of the work that's being done, all the new products and all the business that's been done. We bring in the students, they build the student gardens, and so they get a taste of what the industry is about. There's a huge social component, the meeting after the meeting. So it is it was big not being able to host Congress, but we have Congress Connect, which is a virtual show. Now, what we found out really quickly, because we're connected with all of our counterparts in the U.S. and Canada, is that conferences work really well virtually. Trade shows so far have all bombed, all virtual trade shows. I haven't seen one that's actually done well. So we're not approaching it as a virtual trade show. Ours is way different. It's a virtual marketplace that is open all year round. Where we've seen that other groups have failed is they're treated like a face-to-face show. It's open 3 days. You cram everything in those 3 days, and then you expect everybody to be in front of a computer going from booth to booth, and it's not going to work. So our virtual marketplace, even though it starts in January, will be open year round. If just for the marketplace piece, it's free. Please register. And for the conference part, the conferences are amazing this year. They'll work quite well. So anyway, that's enough for me, Joe. Sorry about that. Okay.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate that update. There's some really important work that Landscape Ontario is doing, and some really fantastic wins recently. And so next up, and just before I introduce our guest speaker, I just want to give a special thanks to Kanisha. She is our member engagement coordinator. She did all the behind the scenes work to set up this meeting. So a very special thanks to Kanisha for all of her hard work in putting this together. But I would like to introduce now a very good friend who I had the distinct pleasure of serving on the APLD board with. That's the Association of Professional Landscape Designers. We served for a number of years together. Susan is the principal and design director of Susan Cohan Gardens, a full service landscape design studio located in the New York and New Jersey metro area. For more than 15 years, she and her team have created landscape designs for discerning regional and international clients. The finished results are frequently published and have won numerous awards. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Landscape Ontario community, I'd like to introduce Susan Cohan.
Hi. So I guess I'm up. I'm sitting in my office. You can see it opens to my house. For those 15 more or plus years, I think we're up to maybe 18 now. I've always worked in a home office. Now it takes up the front third of my house, and there's other people that come in, and it's divided. So the windows are open behind, so the heat from the house comes into the office. Otherwise, I would be an icicle. So at any rate, what I'd like to do, one of the things, and you'll see me mentioning APLD quite a bit today, one of the things that I find extremely valuable in my design practice is actually not the books behind me, although they are valuable, is visiting gardens. And beginning in about 2007 or 2008, maybe a little bit before that, I set out to do that as often as practical. Obviously, APLD conferences were part of that because they have garden visits, fabulous garden visits. I traveled. I've used, do you guys have Garden Conservancy, or is that just a US thing? The Garden Conservancy here is kind of like the national scheme in England, in that there's open garden days and they're private gardens, and you pay, I think it's up to $8 now to visit a garden, and they have certain days in certain states. And so I would map out an entire day. Sometimes my entire staff would go with me, and we'd road trip and visit garden to garden to garden to garden to garden. I would want to keep going. They wouldn't want to stop. So it is what it is. So what I've done is I've put together a somewhat loosely organized presentation about the lessons that I've learned from visiting some of these gardens. Some of them are iconic. You'll know them. Others aren't. There's private little gardens somewhere. I have a couple of international gardens. I ran out of US gardens that were easily visitable. So I started going and visiting gardens in about 2013 or 14 internationally in the winter. And specifically in the winter, not because that was when it was the most convenient time for me to go, but because I was really interested in structure, and I was really interested in what those gardens looked like without all the bells and whistles of flowers and furniture and people and everything. Okay, so I'm going to start, and I have to, like, hopefully we'll be able to do this right. And we'll start. I'm going to share screen and start the slideshow from the beginning. It'll take a second. There we go. Okay, you guys are going to be kind of off to the left. Yep. All right, so I also will tell you that I stopped dating these slides because it got to the point where I couldn't remember. So if it's a dated slide, it's probably 5 years old. Undated slide, it'll say many visits or multiple times or many years or whatever. This is a garden that most people wouldn't think of as a garden, and it's more pocket plantings within the mezzanine level of the Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. And we went to this with APLD a number of years ago. And it's a Frank Gehry building. I'm also interested in architecture and furniture, just about anything that has to do with design. You know, a design article, let me read it. But what really struck me here, and I have not been able to capitalize on, was the way the light interacted in this space here. And these are reflections off of his aluminum and steel polished panels. And of course, it's beautiful Los Angeles light, not the gray overcast garbage we have in New Jersey today. But it's a thing that I've thought about since I visited this. I look at this slide and I think I really would like to be able to do that. And I wondered, it was really funny. One of the things I thought about with the monolith, the steel monolith that appeared in the middle of Utah and someplace else, was, I wonder if that reflected light on the ground. So I'm obviously still thinking about that one. Find my little arrows here, they're hard to see. There we go. Okay, so in my day job, this is what I do. I am a residential landscape designer. I work for what we call here the 1%. I do some public work. The Fibonacci spiral, if you follow me on Instagram, on the lower right, you've seen a drone footage of that design. This week, a landscape architect friend of mine lives near there and shot some drone footage. I'm not that good at drone or all of that. I work with Dynascape. It's actually probably how Joe and I connected initially, and have been using Dynascape for a really, really, really long time. I also teach at a community college where I teach Dynascape and landscape design. So if you know anything about New Jersey, and I don't expect you do other than, you know, it's Jersey, that we have incredible deer pressure here. So that our plants, we're USDA zone 6, where I live, and you know, it's not unusual in my little 50 by 100 lot. I live in an urban area, you know, not very, it's not super suburban. It's not unusual for me to have a 3-point buck or 4-point buck rocking across my backyard. So I've become very, very adept, I believe, at using plants that Bambi doesn't prefer. So that's also always an interest when I'm out in the world, is like, what doesn't Bambi like here? All of the gardens that you see here are unfenced and unsprayed. So I think that's pretty good record, just the photographic record of those. All right, so here's where we're gonna start. We're gonna start in the past. Some of these gardens are not pretty. Some of them have no money if they're public. This being one that has absolutely no money. It's the King's Garden at Fort Ticonderoga, which is at the Vermont end of Lake Champlain. It was designed by Marion Coffin in the 20s. And because it has the layout, the brick layout is there, the wall is there, the plantings are all loose interpretations of what might have been. And this garden is basically run on a shoestring. What I liked about it was the fact that they didn't try to compete with what they had, and made the best use out of what was existing that they could on a very, very, very low budget. If you turned around from where the tree is on the left and faced out, you would see a very, very derelict but quite beautiful summer house. This is not part of the park, although Ticonderoga is a private park, a private public park, if that makes sense. But the house is not, is just falling down. And we just happened upon it driving to actually Montreal in a roundabout way one summer. It turns out that Katie Peters, who's a garden writer, did her internship or externship in this garden years and years and years ago, and was responsible for planting some of the plants that you see here. I didn't know that till years after I visited, though. So this is really about making what is and celebrating what is without having to spend a lot of money. And that's something that I kind of need to be reminded of in my practice all the time, because I'm very good at spending other people's money. This is Heritage Park. I'm going swinging totally the other direction. This is in Fort Worth, and this is an endangered park. It was designed by Lawrence Halperin and had become, it's walled again, and had become basically a drug den. It is a park that has a water feature that runs all the way through it. On the top left, you can see the terminus of where the water ends, and then it actually does cycle up through the bottom right is kind of where it starts, and it goes all through the park. This park, I'll be brutally honest, is probably the only park where upon leaving it, I burst into tears because it deserved to be restored. It was so remarkable, and the city of Fort Worth did not want to restore it. I think it's still standing. It hasn't been completely restored, but they are doing work on it and raising money for it. And I know that there's some really big hitters that are helping to restore it. While we were there, all these people are standing here watching a gray fox that happened to be wandering through the park. That's how few people are in it. You can't go into this park without special permission. It's like barbed wired off, and we were very lucky to be able to do that. So give me a bosque like this of trees, and I'm I love this kind of thing. James Rose is our homegrown part of the Harvard Five, and I worked on his house for 4 or 5 consecutive springs. If you know anything at all about James Rose, he was a modernist madman, and worked in the suburban environment, which is the same environment that I work in. And I met him actually when I was in high school, because I went to high school the next town over. But what was interesting to me about working on James's house, which has a foundation now that is, I think it's a foundation for suburban landscape design or something, that is trying to preserve this thing, is that he recycled everything, it was totally sustainable. Stuff was put together basically with chewing gum and dental floss, hardware cloth, common materials, stuff he found in dumpsters, all celebrated and all used. This on the bottom right is a roof deck that's built on the top of the house. And this is his house. Part of it burned in the last year he was living there. And so it's not in the greatest repair, although it is open to the public. And again, this is probably the best example of his work that's still around. I really like modernist architecture, landscape architecture. This is a Garden Conservancy project, and you can see what the deer have done to the yews here. Yews are like candy for them. It has since been restored. This is the first day it was opened, and it's a Garden Conservancy restoration project. It's local to me, and I've visited many, 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 many times. These yews have all been removed, but what was fascinating to me was the use of rookwood pottery specific to the site that you see on the lower right-hand side. All throughout, there was like, this happened to be a non-working fountain. There was a rookwood, little piece of rookwood pottery all over every door. And to be able to add this kind of detail, I was found to be really fascinating, and not something that I would necessarily do, but I really liked the way it was done and felt like it inspired me in some way to add these kinds of details to the work that I was doing, particularly with regards to masonry. We add now, I work with a stone carver, and very often we'll add a carved piece of stone to a fireplace or a seating area. I work with a grave sandblaster, and we sandblast address numbers into walkways, into bluestone walkways, for clients to kind of personalize it just to them. If you have any questions too, just holler them out. I'll be happy. I'm very flexible. I'll be happy to answer them. Okay. This is in Ohio. Maybe you'll recognize the Birch Alley on the right. It's very, very famous, and it was Henry Manning's Birch Alley at Stan Hewitt Hall. And then on the left is what they call the English Garden. It's not. It's full of native plants, actually. Designed by Ellen Biddle Shipman. Now, if I was anybody's groupie, it would be hers. I admire her work. I've been able to work on reinterpreting and restoring some bones of some of the gardens that she designed in the 20s. And what I admire most about her work is that it is so utterly consistent in terms of her point of view, which is fantastic, strong structure, and then plant it with abandon. And I think that, you know, that's probably, if I could say anything about my work, is that's exactly what we do. This is Lotus Land out in California. This is if you've ever get a chance to, has anybody ever been to Lotus Land? It's amazing. You have to make an appointment to go. It was built by an ex-opera singer. This is her swimming pool. The fountains are these giant clam shells. She's got abalone shells lining her pool. It's just this tour de force of nuttiness. I'm not that loose, but I would love to be that loose. I would love to be able to use found objects in this way, but this is so intensely personal that, you know, it's not something that I could do as a designer and say, here, I'm going to design you a personal garden, and here it is. I try to incorporate aspects of what people are interested in, but there's no way. This is a garden that somebody had to do for themselves. Innisfree in New York State. Again, these are all historic gardens on some level, maybe not going back to the 1700s, but they are definitely historic. I go here every couple of years. This is what's called a Chinese cup garden. The large pond is in the center. There are bowls and landforms everywhere. It's just, and you make a giant circuit around the pond, you go over the bridge to the back, and then there's more circuit, and then kind of up to the upper right, and then you come back over the bridge. And again, it's open to the public. They had a hard time this year, and they were only allowing 2 or 3 people into the park at a time, even though it's big, because they couldn't control it once people were there. on a good Saturday, this is a full place. And this is a private public park. Another Ellen Biddle Shipman garden. This one has met the Wrecker's Ball. And this was all that was left of a much larger garden. And I think what struck me about this more than anything else was the way the brick was used in kind of three different ways. The soldier course around the pond, the kind of upright garden edging, which may or may not have been original, as well as the brick wall. This was very close to a house and has now been demolished for a household addition. So it doesn't exist anymore. This was again through the Garden Conservancy. North Carolina, yeah, I really zigzagged across the states for 10 years, going to whatever gardens I could manage to go to. What's cool about the Montrose Gardens, Nancy Goodwin's garden, and this is not a picture of the famous part. The famous part is her yellow and blue garden, but I really love the way everything spills over here. I've found, and maybe you've found, that many of the gardens, and actually I went back to a garden I wanted to enter in a competition in the fall with dragging my photographer to photograph the grasses, and what the maintenance had been so horrible that we couldn't photograph it. So in this way, sometimes you can skirt the maintenance issue and just forget about string trimming and making nice, neat pathways, and just having these kind of naturalistic edges along things would help with lack of maintenance, which is really the single biggest problem that I find. This is Vizcaya, which is in Coral Gables, right outside of Miami. And they made a classical Venetian garden in Coral Gables in the 20s again. It was crazy money. This garden, I think, more than anything else, the structure and the maintenance of this is something that I really admired. You don't find maintenance like this in a lot of gardens, and they don't have a lot of gardeners here. They have 3, and where they couldn't maintain it, they adapted. So in the lower right, you'll see what was a very formal kind of parterre, and what they've done is planted cactus, aloes, and grasses in formal lines, and then the wall planters are just planted with annuals. And this takes very, very little maintenance again. So again, these are things that, there's not a lot of skilled labor. I think we're moving back into an era here. I know there's in New Jersey, I don't know about in Ontario where you guys are, there is a huge movement to limit the use of blowers. To not allow blowers to be used between the 1st of May and the 1st of October at all, 0. So there's going to be a need, I believe, training people in traditional pruning, raking, gathering methods that are not, the 2-cycle and 3-cycle engines. Pretty soon we'll have to use push mowers. This is one of my gardens, and you can see clearly influenced by everything that you've just seen. This was a historic garden going back to the American Revolution. I was lucky enough to have 4 seasons worth of 1 year, 4 seasons worth of planting. It had been an annual garden. It had also been Lafayette's headquarters during the American Revolution. So the little pruned boxwood alley here is a nod to the French gardens that I had been to. And then these very inexpensive Monet arches. These are not custom. These are off the shelf from Agra Frames. I think they were less than $100 each. They've been standing, this garden still exists. It was sold last year. I don't know what's going on with it. The fountain was from salvaged parts. So the homeowner was a hardcore dumpster diver. So he built this fountain out of parts that he had found. So this one has won a couple of awards and has been published several times. Vizcaya again, probably the most, the best example I can show anybody. I show this to my students. Lawn is a shape. And this is definitely lawn is a shape. These are turf grass. They're probably zoysia grass, which is what they use in Florida. If we use it here, it's very invasive. But these are perfectly manicured rectangles and circles. And I just thought that was just a really great idea to break up what would have been just paving. It's still steppable, it's still walkable, it still relates to the rest of the garden. But it breaks up the expanse of hardscape. Similar idea here, and a failed experiment. I'm going to show you some failures also. So on the left, you have the L'Orangerie at Versailles, which is very, very famous. Again, lawn is a shape. Those are turf grass. It's a turf grass parterre. They mow it. They edge it and they mow it. And you can walk on it. So then I was working with a show house with an APLD New Jersey chapter, and we were looking at slides for inspiration. They were like, oh, let's do that. I'm like, no, let's not. Oh yeah, we can do it with annuals. So this is the not so great experiment on the right of annuals in a lawn, and using its inspiration from Versailles, where this was a probably 30 by 60 foot space. The good news is that I would probably try this again, but I would use grasses and make grass shapes, like use a longer ornamental grass instead of these colors. I wasn't in charge of the color here. So, but I view this as a really failed experiment. Okay, gardens that really pique our imaginations in some way. They may not be the most practical of gardens, but they're gardens where the creativity level is so high, and the use of plants and structure is so out of the box that they really deserve our consideration in terms of ways that we can reinterpret or reimagine or even just steal an idea. Here, this is on the left is in Seattle, and it's designed by Little and Little. And this is a giant cast leaf that's part of a fountain. Little and Little are known for their columns, these columns that have sometimes there's planters on top of them, sometimes there's not. The one on the right is from the Denver Botanical Gardens. Sometimes these columns are purple. These happen to be green, and the ones on the right are pink. They were extremely popular in the early aughts. I haven't seen any new work from them in a while, so I don't know if they're still doing this. But this idea that something had been here before, maybe it was a ruin, maybe it wasn't, they don't look new, and incorporating those ideas into the landscape as a design intent, I think is interesting. Again, another ruin. This one is at Chanticleer. If you ever get a chance to go to Chanticleer, go to Chanticleer. It is one of the most amazing gardens I have ever been to. This is a built ruin. Chris Woods, when he was the director there, spearheaded this whole idea of this ruined house, that a garden that had kind of become feral. And it's planted, obviously. You can go, it's planned there. It's remarkable in that it sits really well in the landscape and looks like it has always been there, and it's maybe 20 years old. If you don't know Chris Woods, his book Garden Lust is worth buying. It's about, he profiles, I'm going to say 25 or 30 current cutting edge gardens. So, you know, when you think about things, I was probably first visited Chanticleer maybe in 2004. I've been there, you know, whenever I'm in the area, I try and go. And recently, I pulled up these slides and I showed them to one of the assistant designers I have. And I said, you know what, we're going to do this. We have a project where we can do this. And we are actually doing a much, much smaller version. And I was revising it because it needed a revision right before the meeting, where we are building a ruin in the middle of the woods. So it will look like a ruin. I wanted to build it this tall. That got the kibosh yesterday. So, oh well, I'll adapt. So it will still look like, I'm always fascinated when I'm driving, you know, in what's here, we would consider the country, you know, there's farms about 15 miles from here. When I see a foundation that's just sitting abandoned in the middle of nowhere, but there's still the chimney or there's still the fireplace. And I've always thought that, you know, those spaces would make really evocative, wonderful, outdoor entertaining spaces. So that's what we're trying to do. The drawings are a mess, or I would have put a slide in here. You can, if you follow me on Instagram, you can go back and see the original concept. I don't know if I'm going to post the new one. It's not as exciting, but these giant acorns, I have one on my front porch, are from Marcia Donahue. And there's sculptures of hers all throughout this ruin. There's even a library and there's stone books. The local stone outside of Pennsylvania is mica schist. So the book that's face out is the book that says The Holy Schist, which I thought was really funny. This is another one that's a ruin, and it has stepping stones. There's a grotto. This just floors me that somebody even thought of this. This is Patrick Chassé, who's a landscape architect in the States, very well known, does a lot of historical work. So you step across these stones into the grotto. That blue porthole that you see is the bottom of the swimming pool that's above this. So this houses a little table and chairs, but also provides the end support for the swimming pool. Not something I would necessarily do, but I just thought it was inspiring that somebody else did. So I did this. This was, again, for a show house. This is still standing 15 years later. It has no mortar. It's a sort of a Romanesque rock arch. We built it for a show house. You can walk under it. It's about 12 feet long and maybe 8 or 9 feet tall at its tallest part. And you can walk through it. And then I was really inspired. I'd never visited, and I still haven't visited, by Beth Chattow's book, The Dry Garden. So we built a gravel garden of deer-resistant plants here. This is the only part of this show house that is still standing. And if you know anything about New Jersey, we have what's considered to be the worst freeze thaw in the nation. It can be 4 degrees one day and 40 degrees the next in February. So there's a lot of movement going on underneath the ground, and this held up. But again, inspired by all of that kind of ruined rock work that I look at. I love stone, so that's a good thing. Here's another kind of fanciful. This is a pool house, and it is a Greek temple built completely out of bark and timbers. In Connecticut. Yes, you have to be extremely wealthy or crazy to do this. But the pool is obviously to the left. And I just thought, gosh, what a crazy, crazy person to do this. Well, it's Bunny Williams, who's a really well-known interior designer and garden designer. And this is her pool house. So good luck, Bunny. And then down the road from there is Michael Trapp's garden. This is not Italy. This pool on the right is probably the most photographed and published lap pool you have ever seen. The Italian cypress, and Michael happened to be there that day. And I'm not shy. I will walk up to anybody. I'm like, that's Michael Trapp. I've never met him. I'll introduce myself. I asked him how he got these trees to be like this. Well, they were 10-gallon Hetziais from Home Depot. And he has spent 15 years pruning them to look like Italian cypress. He gets up there twice a year on a ladder and tops them and prunes them into this very, very narrow conical shape. So junipers can be a really good thing. I would never attempt this. But you're walking around in Connecticut. Yeah, it's cold in Connecticut. And all of a sudden you're in this Italian garden. I'm like, this is nutty. How did he do it? So I asked him, that's how he did it. Marcia Donahue is the one that did the big acorns that you saw in the slide at Chanticleer. She's another nut, a good nut, an artist. She works in clay and stone, carved stone and mold clay. On the left, you have a necklace that's on a tree in the front of her, in her front garden. And on the right, you have two kind of vignettes. One where she's taken, the lower one where she's taken kind of shards of gravestones and carved a skull to go with them. And then her little sign. And her garden, if you're ever in Berkeley, is open, probably not this year, but it's open like every third Sunday. She opens it to the public. Hortulus Farms, this garden just was rejected for the third time. Rennie Reynolds, or Jack Staub, I'm sorry, passed away this past year, and they're selling Hortulus Farms, and they wanted to sell it to the county as a park, and I think that has been rejected for the last time. So this beautiful, very artfully landscape will probably be subdivided. What you're looking at on the left is the swimming pool, and the right. And I didn't realize it was a swimming pool when I first got there, because there's this long double border, and this is the focal point. And it didn't dawn on me. Sometimes I can be like really slow on the uptake. It didn't dawn on me. I'm like, why in the world are they going to have those chaise lounges over there looking at the fountain? There's better views than this from that point of view, until I realized that this was actually a swimming pool. I would love to do a round pool. I just haven't had the client to do it yet. Have you guys seen upticks in pools? You can shake your heads. We have huge upticks in pools here due to COVID. Everybody wants a swimming pool. This is a landscape architect's garden, and all of these gardens in this section are gardens where the person who has built them has kind of let their imagination guide them. So on the right, on the left rather, you have a very kind of mundane roofed seating area. This is in Oregon, it rains, so it's got a roof on it, but it's completely lined. I took a picture of one with funhouse mirrors, and the other side too, which is really great. And I've thought about it, and then a couple of years later, I was doing a children's garden, and I was like, oh, funhouse mirrors, and easy to install, inexpensive, a lot of fun. You can have cocktails out here, and you can be as thin or as fat as you want. In another part of his garden, he's got these amazing copper water snakes I find them a little creepy. I thought they were interesting. I was okay with them until there was one that was actually going over a stepping stone. I'm like, I'll back out now. But just the fact that they did this, I think a lot of times we, as designers and as design build, we don't allow ourselves the freedom to explore something. I always not always, but I would say 85% of the time, present my most outrageous idea first. And if they go for it, great. If they don't go for it, then I can show them a progression, a modification of it, like my ruin in the woods. Andy Cow and Xavier Perez have made show gardens and conceptual gardens all over the world. This is on the left is called Rain, obviously, and it's chicken wire and chandelier crystals on poles and sand mounds. This was at Cornerstone Gardens when Cornerstone Gardens was really a venue for experimental show gardens. And just about everybody from Ken Smith to Walter Hood to Xavier Cow have been part of that, those show gardens. On the right is probably my favorite public garden in the world, and it's Canadian. And it's Reeford Gardens in Quebec. If you have never been, go, 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 go. It is remarkable. It is stimulating. It is boring. It is falling down, and it's not falling down, and it's just incredible. I made a trip there over the 4th of July weekend here in 2012, and I still go back and refer to all my pictures all the time. What I found incredible for me, coming from Zone 6, where we don't get as cold as you guys get, was that in the 4th of July, and I think we were there on the 4th or the 5th, everything that's in bloom here in May and June and July was in bloom simultaneously there and stretched out because the light is so limited. It really, if you haven't been, go. Seriously, it's and maybe this next one might really be my favorite, but Reeford is the second. This is Majorelle, which has been photographed and photographed and photographed and photographed. It's in Marrakech. I went to Morocco to go to this garden. I started out in the fashion industry and spent about 15, 16 years in the fashion industry before I taught for a while and then retooled and became a landscape designer. And those lessons kind of that you learn as a designer, it doesn't matter what you study, good design is good design. But what was interesting to me here, and I didn't realize, all of this color is painted, and it's painted on, the pots are painted, they're like flat latex paint on terracotta, and they get painted every year. This Marrakech Blue is very, very famous. It's now a museum, well worth going to Morocco to go to this. And again, this is the second garden where I burst into tears. I burst into tears because I wandered into an area in the back, and that's where Yves Saint Laurent is buried, and I was just like, oh gosh, and I just burst into tears. Who knows why? But that's what I did when I came back. This was a show garden. So I took those same ideas of bold color, abandon, just go for it, and came back and did this as a show garden for a local show house that we have every 2 years in May. People just loved this, but they thought I was nuts because it's so not like anything that might be here. And this is how that was interpreted for a client who just loves color. This fence, we just repainted this year. This was done a number of years ago, and we do actually do interiors and exteriors for this client. This was replaced this year, and I don't have a new picture of it because it's COVID. Right. Voyeuristic pleasures. Okay. So sometimes you go, and I know I do because I work for these people. but could never afford this on my own. So when I go to visit gardens, I'm looking to visit the ones that have really spent a lot. This is a vegetable garden fairly close to me, designed by a landscape architect who's now retired. But to me, this like orderly idea, you don't think the homeowner ever goes out in this garden. Her cook does, but she doesn't. But it was almost like a little Villandry in that it was like so tidy and so perfect. Vegetable gardens never look this perfect. This is a local landscape designer, actually, and now they do soils. This is her vegetable garden out in a little bit further west of here. And they've developed this over a series of years. And what impresses me about this particular garden is that it's almost all recycled materials. The fence, parts of the fence are recycled. The cobblestones came from Philadelphia. The greenhouse that you can see in the back was at Rutgers University, and they went and disassembled it and reassembled it on their property. So yeah, it looks like somebody spent a lot of money, but in actuality, they spent a lot of sweat equity. And this would be my interpretation of those two gardens. And again, for a show house, temporary. This was a dog run, and they recently contacted me and asked me if I would be interested in restoring it. And I went and looked at it, and they hadn't done anything with it in 12 years. And I'm like, you know, you really got to start all over. If you don't want this, don't keep this. You really have to start all over. And this was the size, this garden was the size of what my current lot is, which is about 50 by 150 feet. We donated all the food from here to the local food pantry. And in a month, we're able to donate over 350 pounds of fresh produce to a local food pantry, which they were really grateful for. But again, it's very tidy. Swimming pools are always a voyeuristic pleasure, something that I don't have and don't want. But I would certainly be happy to sit out here for a couple hours, couple days, couple weeks, couple months, gaze out into the hills, take a dip when I wanted to. This is in Connecticut. Here's another one from our Texas trip, the APLD Texas trip. What's interesting to me about this is Philip Johnson. I'm sure you know Philip Johnson as an architect. He had plenty of famous buildings he designed. And I didn't realize it until somebody maybe 4 or 5 years ago gave me a birthday present to visit the glass house in Connecticut, which was his house. And I didn't realize that he built small versions of this, of every iconic building that he built all over his property. So, and this was there. I'm like, wow, you know, but it was a garden folly. It wasn't it was a little pond and a little building. It wasn't this big thing. So he kind of built them before he built them. And then who wouldn't want to sit in this hot tub in Santa Barbara, please? This is what I call voyeuristic pleasures, things that I'll happily experience. This was again out in California, but this time in Northern California, out in Silicon Valley, out in Palo Alto. This particular, Patrick Doherty does stick work, these stick work buildings and environments all over the United States, at least in botanical gardens. But this particular family had commissioned him to build this as a playhouse for their children. And it's huge, it's human size. Again, you can see these in botanical gardens. They usually aren't sprouting though. Okay, now this is things that, how am I doing on time? Good or okay? I don't get to.
We're getting close, Susan.
Okay, we're almost done.
Perfect. It's been so
So
good.
this is things I'm still thinking about that I haven't shown you yet. In California, they pollard their trees. In Europe, they pollard their trees. I think a lot of our trees could be pollarded, and they create the great sculptural effect. On a trip to Paris, and now I go back and forth to Paris every couple of years for a trade show in January. These are pleached trees in two concentric rectangles. And I love the way that these ghost shapes, and thinking about the winter landscape and what you can do with structure in the winter landscape is something that I have been exploring more and more and more in my own design work. Again, pollarded trees. On the right is the central entrance to the Greater Des Moines Botanical Gardens. And these are liquid amber, slender silhouette in a grove. Kelly Norris, who is no longer working there, designed and planted this. I just thought it was these slender trees in a grove, fantastic idea. Probably one of the most evocative gardens. Everybody goes gaga over the Lurie Garden, which is across the street from this and is the Pete Aldoff Garden in Chicago. But Roy Diblick's garden at the Art Institute, I think, is just poetic and beautiful and easily achieved and easily maintained. Again, structure and abandon. I know I'm speeding up a little bit. On the right, Reeford Gardens again. On the left, rather, Reeford Gardens again. I had never seen blue Himalayan poppies, so now I did. And on the left, the same kind of idea on the right with alliums in a private garden. And this garden no longer exists either. It was sold in a divorce. One of my gardens, kind of taking all of those ideas the Roy Diblick idea, but instead of using trees, using tree-formed shrubs. These are hydrangeas. Again, same garden, different area. Massed plants. And I'm using fewer and fewer plants and more of them, I'm finding. On the left, is light. This again is from Hortalist Farms, and on the left is from the High Line. Again, lighting and reflection are just things that we need to play up. I want to play with. And going back to that very first slide of the Disney concert hall, that idea of reflection and light is something that I know that I am never going to master. I work with a lighting designer. That's all he does because it's just so important, particularly in the dark. Andy Goldsworthy's wall at Storm King Sculpture Center in New York State was obviously my inspiration for this walkway. So what I'm trying to show you now is how you can literally interpret and steal. There are no new ideas. A rickety little fence on the left at Skylands, our very sad New Jersey Botanical Garden, sad because it has no money and no maintenance. And we interpreted that as a vegetable garden fence, and it actually has chicken wire that you can't see in the slide. Keep the animals out. Two gardens combined into one. So we have the grass steps at Dumbarton Oaks going up to the house, a series of terraces and grass steps. And then the planted cheek wall, a planted cheek wall from Chanticleer became a private garden. And this was actually built on the footprint of an Ellen Biddle Shipman garden. So I felt fairly good stealing from her contemporary as well as Chanticleer to give a new entrance to her garden. All right, the future. Benzinger Wine, this is an insectary in the middle of a winery in Sonoma, California. I firmly believe that we have to do as much as we can for pollinators and give them as big a chance as we can give them. They're doing this in Europe. In every public park I've been in France, actually, you find habitat and insectaries and insect hotels. On the top right is a left, rather, sorry, I don't know my rights from my left, is a contemporary version in the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. They can be as simple as the two little ones below it, or as elaborate as this giant insect hotel that's at the Museum of Natural History in Paris. Green roofs, continuing to develop green roofs. Our college has a green roof that nobody gets to see. I have to climb up a really rickety, weird utility ladder to look at it. But because we're LEED Platinum building, that was part of our things. Green roofs. I think there's still a lot of work to be done with green roofs and planting green roofs. Most people don't realize that the Lurie Garden specifically in Chicago is a giant green roof. It's built on top of a parking lot. They have problems because of that too. Permeable paving doesn't have to be ugly, doesn't have to be pavers. Fighting, and I've done this successfully once, fighting municipal ordinances to allow us to build twin track driveways so we can plant the center section. And then we do a lot of what's on the left in that we interplant patios. Gabion walls, the call's still out on gabion walls. This is at Grounds for Sculpture. The ones along the highway from near me are failing. They're collapsing on themselves. But they're also more than a mile long. So who knows who built, how well they were built. This one is just filled with rubble and gravel. I've seen them filled with clay pots and stone. It's a good permeable solution. Very, very simple plantings, making sure that there's always a permeable space where you have hardscape meetings so that there's room for water to perk and water to move. I don't know if you guys have the same water rules we have. We're beginning to have more and more and more very strict rules about containing stormwater and keeping it on the property. Vertical gardens. Again, the call's still out. I haven't seen very many vertical gardens that have been well maintained. This is at the Perez Center in Miami. It's by Patrick Blank, the famous Greenwall guy. But I will tell you that at least 1/3 of these was dead. They're cool looking, but 1/3 of them weren't making it. This is a brand new botanical garden that they've installed there. Stormwater retention and retaining water on site, particularly in places where there's more and more water, like Oregon. This is a city park in Oregon. That's basically a giant bioretention area. We're doing, again, more and more in that. Cisterns, we have one at the college. We don't use it. In this case, it can be used. I have used them once on a job to pump for irrigation. But again, retaining stormwater on site is becoming more and more and more important in terms of our design practice. And yes, I do visit these. There's me at the High Line in the middle of February on a freezing day. And I think that's it. I know I sped through the last part, which is probably the most important, except for this. This is in Wisconsin, and it's at Taliesin, which was Frank Lloyd Wright's first house. And it was inspired by Tuscany, which it really looks like in its weird Wisconsin way. But just remember, and this is my favorite quote of all times, is peculiar travel suggestions are dancing lessons from God. And you can learn by looking and being in a space so much better than a picture, which is only one little second in time, even though we all want the picture to show. And this is obviously doesn't look like this today, but that's it. That's it for me. Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much. That
Sure.
was absolutely incredible. I think all 123 of us that are online right now are feeling incredibly inspired. Um, your travels have taken you all over the world to see some pretty incredible gardens and spaces.
Oh, I've got some that are still on the list.
I'm sure. I'm
I've
sure.
never been to Asia. I really want to go to Asia.
Yeah, absolutely. We are short on time, so I will save any kind of questions, but if there are questions, if you want to put them in the chat, we'll definitely make sure that they get to Susan, and when we send out the recording to everybody, we'll make sure that the answers are there.
If you guys want to get in touch with me, you can easily get in touch with me. Excuse me, at susancohangardens.com. If you have questions or just want to say hi, I'd be, happy to say hi back.
Perfect, and we'll put your email address in the chat and your Instagram handle as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Right.
For everybody on the, thank you. I appreciate your time. For everybody still with us, the next part in our program is the chapter meeting. And so Kenesha has set up all the breakout rooms, and each breakout will be the respective chapter across the province. So Kenesha, can you go ahead and open up those rooms? And you'll be able to select the chapter. Feel free to join your chapter or a chapter you've been dying to visit. And the idea here is to have a local relevant networking meeting. And some chapters have planned meetings, others, it's going to be an informal discussion. So thank you so much. As you start to head into those, I'm not sure if I'll get a chance to talk to you again. So I hope you're staying positive while testing negative.